A woman vanished in the woods, and the searchers heard crying from far underground. Paranormal M went back years later. Subscribe to find out what we discovered. The Ghost on the Swing. Last week, I took my little sister to a quiet park a few blocks from home. A place we almost never visit. On Tuesday, everything felt normal. But when we went back Thursday night around 10 p.m., the air had felt different. The park was completely empty, except for us. As soon as we stepped onto the playground, we noticed something strange. 2 swings were moving. No breeze, no children running off. Just 2 empty swings. They were swaying like invisible hands were pushing them. We tried to laugh it off, maybe it was the wind, but the swings kept going. Eventually, we shrugged and played elsewhere. A few minutes later, when the swings finally slowed, my sister ran over and hopped on. I stood right next to her when she suddenly shouted, "Stop swinging me so hard, ghost." And the word ghost hit all of us like a cold splash. We froze. My mom grabbed her hand and we left the park in a hurry. Back home, I casually asked my sister what she had meant. Without a trace of fear, she said that she'd seen a very serious little girl ghost near the swings. We told ourselves it was her imagination, but this afternoon we went back. Sunlight, not moonlight. And after a while, my sister quietly said, "She's here again." She pointed straight at the same pair of swings. My dad asked where exactly. "Right there," she whispered. The swings were perfectly still, yet the air felt heavy, like something unseen was watching. That was enough. We left fast and haven't gone near that park since. I can't shake the memory of those swings moving on their own the first night. At first, it was only odd. The second time, it felt wrong, like the quiet itself was alive. Even my mom admitted she felt that same icy shiver. We don't plan to visit that park again. Some places, it seems, keep their own company. The Seat of White Light. It was a quiet Tuesday noon. It's when my friend and I ducked into Regal Midtown. We went for an early matinee. Hardly anybody goes to the movies at lunchtime, which is exactly why we went. No chatter, no long lines. Just us and a bucket of popcorn. We grabbed our usual spot. Back row, dead center. I hate craning my neck at the screen. While the ads flickered before the previews, something caught our eyes. 2 rows ahead, slightly left of center, one seat glowed. Not projector reflection glowed, radiated. The entire chair from headrest to cushion. It shimmered in a clean, icy white, like it had been wrapped in light itself. No spillover to the floor, no gentle fade to the neighboring seats. Just a solitary beacon in a sea of darkness. Naturally, we tried to figure it out. Maybe the projector's beam was hitting it at some freak angle. We crept closer, casting our bodies in front of it to block the light. Nothing. The glow never wavered. We leaned over it, stretched out our arms, even climbed carefully onto the armrests. Still perfect, unbroken white, as if the seat wasn't reflecting light at all, but producing it. I laughed nervously, because, well, maybe some hidden LED stunt. But there were no wires, no electronics, just the same dull fabric every theater chair has. I half joked it looked like somebody had shrink-wrapped the seat in pure light. Eventually, the movie began. I kept sneaking glances during the opening scenes. The seat still gleamed, stubborn and silent. But the film, it drew us in, and the glowing chair faded into the back of my mind. When the credits rolled, we both instinctively looked. The glow was gone. The theater was still dark. The overhead lights hadn't come on yet, but the seat was now just an ordinary patch of faded upholstery. No trace of what we'd seen. Walking out into the bright afternoon sun, it felt almost ridiculous to feel uneasy. It wasn't a haunted house or a midnight show, yet even now neither of us can explain how one seat for 2 full hours could shine like a phantom, and then simply stop. The Rocking Chair's Warning. Back in the hazy early 2010s, when reality TV still felt half real, I caught an episode of Celebrity Ghost Stories, or something with the same eerie flavor. The story, it stuck to me like silly putty on a newspaper. A man had brought an old farmhouse for himself, well, he didn't bring one, he bought one. He did that for himself and his little girl. And during the closing, the realtor gave an almost casual warning. "There's a ghost here. She's kind and loves the rocking chair in the parlor. Don't mind her." Sure enough, the chair left behind by the former owner, it rocked now and then on its own. At first it was charming. The unseen tenant seemed oddly protective of the daughter. If the TV slipped onto a late-night thriller, click, it shut off. If a window stayed cracked on a cold evening, it somehow slammed shut. Years passed. The daughter grew into a teenager with headphones and a heavy homework load. And one quiet evening, while studying in front of the TV, the screen flickered to black, then lit up with an unsettling image. A lonely roadside tree wrapped in flowers, candles, and photographs. No caption, no sound, just that tree in the hush of a vigil. Weeks later, she began to meet friends for a late drive. Her dad, usually firm, said no. And he couldn't explain it, he just felt it. And that night, every one of those friends died in a drunk driving crash. The next day, trembling, she visited the accident site. It was the tree, same angle, same crooked branch she'd seen on the TV. The father, shaken to his core, carried the creaky rocking chair to the curb before sunrise. And from that day forward, the house fell silent. Epilogue. The episode may have blended other midnight tales into my memory. A famous actress whose carefully blessed mansion went quiet, until a housekeeper tossed out the charms, and on the very flight she took that day, the plane simply vanished. Or maybe the one of my mother who never woke from cosmetic surgery. But the rocking chair remains the spine of it. A quiet, benevolent ghost who saved a life, then vanished with the chair, as if her mission had been completed and ended. The Fourth Floor Shadow. Last autumn, my wife and I spent our honeymoon in St. Augustine. We checked into the grand old Casa Monica Hotel. The place felt like stepping back in time. Ornate chandeliers, velvet armchairs, and the works. Exactly the kind of timeless romance we wanted. But our room, room 311, it had other plans. It started small, the bathroom light flicked on by itself. Once, maybe faulty wiring, but it kept happening. Then the faucet began running without a sound, but just turning, and by the third night, we were on edge. That evening, something leapt literally off the nightstand. A hairbrush shot across the room like it had been swatted. No sliding, no wobble, just airborne. We stared at each other, our hearts were hammering. Later, I stepped out to get ice from the 4th floor, telling myself I needed the break. The corridor outside our room was silent, almost padded, like the air itself was heavy. When the elevator opened, a chill ran down my spine, though the hotel's heating hissed everywhere else. The 4th floor felt wrong. The hallway smelt faintly of old roses and something metallic like iron. The air pressed to my skin. When I found the ice room, the temperature flipped. It was stifling, like walking into a sealed attic at noon. The machine sat dead, humming with a low, useless vibration. Turning back, I saw the elevator doors slide open on their own. I stepped inside, jabbing the lobby button, and then the door closed like a mantra. As the door inched together, movement caught my eye. A shadow, human-shaped but thinner than a person, had glided across the hallway. Then it doubled back, and again it didn't walk. It floated, smooth and unhurried, as if like pacing a pattern older than the hotel itself, it seemed. The doors shut with a soft click. And back in room 311, the faucet dripped once. Just once. We didn't sleep much. Casa Monica doesn't list 311 anymore, it seems. It seems like it should list it on ghost tours, so if you go, enjoy the charm. But when night falls, maybe skip the 4th floor. Where the forest whispers end. I come from the quiet heart of Western Europe, a place where ghost stories are rare as winter roses. Our villages tell of fairy folk hiding in mossy hollows, and of creatures who dance in moonlit glades, but not of spirits lingering after death. Here, the dead are simply gone, folded into silence and soil. Even our oldest castles, their stones blackened with centuries of storms. They're seen as noble ruins rather than haunted halls. The cemetery gates creak only from rust, not restless souls. Yet I've always been curious. I've devoured late-night videos of candlelit seances. I've read about mediums who claim to call the departed back with a single breath of Latin, or maybe a tap on the table. Strangely, most of these stories come from faraway English-speaking worlds like Britain and America, where haunted inns and whispering staircases are almost ordinary. It makes me wonder, is it belief that breeds ghosts? Perhaps where people imagine an afterlife as a lingering half-light, where a soul might pause before heaven or hell, the door for spirit stays open there. Here where I am, our elders are brisk and practical. What dies, dies. No lingering, no in-between, just the deep, dark nothing. And so our places rarely disappear. Forest paths remain merely paths. Ruined abbeys stay empty. No one warns of echoes in the bell towers or footsteps by the river. When the wind sings through the fir trees, we call it weather, not a wandering soul. But sometimes, just sometimes, when the mist pools low and the pines lean in close, I wonder if we've simply forgotten how to listen. Perhaps the fairy folk, and the spirits are the same ancient neighbors wearing different names. Perhaps our ghosts never left. We just stopped believing that they were there. That lines up to me. The Pine Messenger. 3 weeks since my father passed. I drifted into a dream last night that felt almost ordinary at first. He was there, sitting beside me on the couch. He was calm, as if nothing had ever changed. I barely blinked until my mom appeared, smiling softly. "Isn't this wonderful?" she said. And suddenly the air shifted. Something in me whispered that it wasn't right. This isn't real. It doesn't even feel like a dream, but you're not really here, are you? Blink, and he was older now, the frailer version from late last year. You're not real. Are you listening to me? Have you been hearing me when I talk to you? You know, outside of dreams. No, he said quietly. Another blank, and he was weaker still, the way he looked just weeks ago. Are you okay at least? I asked. Yes. Another blank, and now he was the still figure from the hospital bed. I held my breath and I blinked again. This time he wasn't there at all. In his place stood a tall pine tree, sharp green needles catching invisible sunlight, the scent of forest so vivid I could almost taste it. Why a pine tree, such a strangely specific thing? But then I remembered he loved camping, adored fishing trips, and his favorite retreat was a hidden park he called the Pine Way. And that's when I knew it. It wasn't just a dream. Somehow in that quiet evergreen shape he was telling me he'd found his place. The house between waking and burning. It began a few months ago, a night that should have been nothing more than a movie and sleep. My boyfriend and I just finished a chilling thriller, something I usually love. I'm the type who laughs through horror. But that night, the darkness pressed differently. In the first dream, I sat beside a close friend, pregnant in life and in the dream, as she sped a trembling car along a cliffside road so thin it seemed to barely exist. She wasn't angry at me, but something unseen had her jaw tight and eyes cold. The tires screamed, the car lunged, and we plunged. I jerked awake, so I thought. The bedroom was calm, moonlight soft. Turned to tell my boyfriend about the nightmare, and he turned too, but silent. Without a word, he reached and pulled me close, and I said, "Stop, I'm scared." But he kept coming. His silence grew heavier than any shout. When I began to cry, he looked straight into me and smiled. A smile I had never seen on a human face. The realization hit like cold water. I was still inside the dream. I prayed. I don't know why, just an instinct. And at first whispered words. Like I woke again, but into a stranger terror, one of paralysis. Eyes open, breath shallow, body locked. The room looked exactly as it should, yet every shadow whispered wrongness. I prayed harder, and then this voice spoke beside me. But it wasn't his voice. It called me by names I won't repeat. It felt endless until finally, I truly woke and I was sobbing. My phone read 3:38 a.m. We blamed the movie. For a while, that explanation held. Then came the second night. He didn't touch me in the dream this time. He simply crouched on the window ledge, head cocked at an impossible angle, making low animal noises, and I said aloud, "You are not him. This is a dream." Instantly, the paralysis slammed down again. I could barely move a finger to squeeze his real arm until he woke. Terror, sharper than before. The last time was worse. 2 nights before I write this, I slept alone. The heat woke me up first, a blistering summer noon inside an air-conditioned room. I tried to push the blanket aside, but my skin felt as if it were melting. I staggered, or I thought I did. I tried to go back to bed, and that's when I felt arms, heavy and human, lock around my hips. The rest is hard to write. We can fill in the blanks. When I kicked, teeth seemed to sink into me. Not a pinch, not a bite. I clawed at a face I couldn't see, but I could feel them. I could feel the nose and the lips and the eyelashes and warm skin. And the harder I fought, the deeper this bite. I don't know how I escaped. I woke drenched and trembling and humiliatingly wet with fear. The spot where it bit still throbbed through the day. When I showered that evening, a dark mark remained. Since then, even daylight feels fragile. I don't know if my mind is staging cruel plays or if something else shares the dark with me. But every night, as the clock drifts toward 3:38, I find myself praying before I even close my eyes. Midnight in room 314. I wonder if anybody else has had something truly strange happen at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Because a few months back, I stayed overnight in the pediatric wing with my 14-year-old son after his knee surgery. We had a private room, just the two of us, and the door was closed and everything was quiet. I was sleeping on the pull-out chair next to his bed. When around 3:30 a.m., I felt a sharp poke on my upper arm. At first, I thought I dreamed it, but then it came again, clear as day. My son was snoring softly, completely still. No one else was in this room. Then came the part I just can't explain. A heavy pressure slammed onto my chest, like a sandbag dropped from nowhere. I could hardly draw a breath, and panic flared, but something inside me snapped to anger. I began silently reciting the Lord's Prayer. Before I even reached the end, the weight lifted as sudden as it had fallen. I lay there frozen, my heart hammering, until a small scream slipped out and woke my son. I had told him I'd just had a bad dream and forced a smile. The next night wasn't quite so dramatic, though I was plagued by a string of unsettling dreams. We were discharged the following morning. Only after we got home, when the house finally felt normal again, did my son quietly admit he'd been having nightmares the entire time we were there. And they stopped the very first night we came back. Sure, it could have been painkillers or hospital stress, but the timing still gives me chills. Has anyone else ever felt something uninvited walking the halls of Johns Hopkins in the middle of the night? The Billboard Phantom. When I was 16, I worked late shifts at a fried chicken joint. It was off a quiet 2-lane road. The place sat in a squat brick building that had once been a cozy family diner. It was tied to the roadside inn next door. Locals said the inn's founder adored that diner, never forgave himself when it folded and was sold to a franchise. One damp autumn morning, the opening crew arrived to find a sight they'd never forget. The motel owner hanging from a billboard just beyond her back lot. framed by a pale sunrise. After that, nothing in our kitchen felt ordinary again. It began subtly. Warmer doors would snap open and shut on their own. Click, dunk, click, dunk. Even when no one was nearby. And some nights, when only the manager and a lone closer were left, the sound seemed to carry through the empty prep room like a metronome for ghosts. Soon, the biscuit trays joined in. Oh yeah. At first, they merely tipped and clattered to the floor, but within days they started sailing clear across the kitchen, as if flung by invisible hands. And more than one of us saw it happen midair. One night after closing, the whole crew collapsed into the dining room for a breather, and above us hung a promo rack of souvenir cups. Without warning, something struck it with a sharp slap. Cups rained down behind a half wall, but when we hurried over, they weren't scattered. They were all perfectly upright, like someone had arranged them one by one. And that was the moment Tyler, our loudest cook, lost his nerve. "Screw you, ghost," he yelled and bolted for the fryer station. A coin no one has ever found. Really, where it came from, it seemed to whip across the room and pinged him on the back of the head, and every single one of us saw it. My last night sealed the decision to quit. I just finished scrubbing the sinks. I was rolling the trash into the alley door when the rinse hose snapped alive. It sprayed full blast into my face and wouldn't stop. It was as though someone with an unseen force had their foot on the pedal. When it finally sputtered out, silence filled the kitchen like a held breath. I wheeled the garbage outside, clocked out, and never came back. To this day, when I drive past that faded motel and its leaning billboard, I swear I catch the faint echo of metal doors softly click-dunking in the dark. The long-faced guest. I should begin with this. People have died on the property where I live, and my house sits on old Pennsylvania grounds, just a few minutes from Gettysburg. And the air sometimes feels occupied. 2 nights ago, I had a sleepover with my sister W and friends A and L, W's friend S, and my younger cousin J and O. They're quite a bit younger than the rest of us, so they mostly watch from the sidelines. As midnight came and went, we pulled out a favorite card game, One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I've played it countless times without incident. The rules are simple. Each player gets a secret role. Some are werewolves, some are villagers. Others have special powers that let them spy or swap cards in the dark. After a brief round of closed eyes and whispered instructions, everyone debates and votes to catch the werewolf. Harmless fun, until it wasn't. And at first everything ran normally, but then we noticed that cards kept landing in the wrong places. Rolls that should have changed didn't. Stranger still, 3 of us, me, A, and L, kept ending up in the same rolls again and again. Insomniac, seer, and drunk. Statistically impossible. One time I began as the lone werewolf. I peeked at the center cards and I saw the insomniac there. Yet when the round ended, my card had become the insomniac, and the werewolf was now in the center. We suspected a prank, of course, but no one confessed. So we played on, uneasily. J and O eventually dozed off, removing them as suspects. Still, the impossible swaps continued and card shifting as if moved by unseen hands. Finally, we set the deck aside. But curiosity clawed at us, and after some nervous chatter outside, we returned and began again. That's when the night turned sharp. A card called the Tanner vanished mid-game. We searched every inch of carpet and couch. Nothing. We restarted only to hear thuds on the floor during a round. One heavy right where the card lay, and a softer one between A and L. A cold draft followed, enough to wake O crying. We entered the game and boxed it. We left it in another room. Morning brought no relief. Jay opened the box and found the Tanner card sitting on top face up. And later, after I meticulously stacked the deck and logged the order, we left the room for an hour. When we returned, the Seer card lay face up on top. No one had entered. And by daylight we tested it again, even moving to W's darkened bedroom. The phenomena persisted, roles defying logic, cards rearranging themselves. Finally, we switched off the lights, using only L's phone flashlight. And that's when the real horror began. L suddenly whispered that she could see A's face, or rather couldn't. She could only see mine faintly. She leaned forward, squinting, and then recoiled. "It's not your face," she said. A turned to look and screamed. They described a figure superimposed over me. A man with a long, gaunt face, a sharp nose, and beady eyes. No bangs. He had a slow, crooked smile, and I sat frozen while they insisted it grew closer each time we darkened the room. And at one point, Elle sketched what she saw in the dim light, only to drop the pencil with a gasp, asking if I was smiling when I wasn't. We turned the lights on, and never turned them off again, and we have not played that game since. Somewhere in that house, a long-faced guest still waits for nightfall. At least that's the feeling I get. The Woman on County Road 19. It was just past 3 in the morning. It's when I started the long drive back to the city. The night was cold and strangely still. I was on a 26-mile rural stretch. 2 lanes of cracked asphalt bordered by dark fields and tree lines that seemed to lean in on the road itself. The city's distant glow floated in the horizon like a faint ember. 5 miles from home, I caught sight of something odd ahead. A sedan sat motionless in the right lane, hazard light off, but headlights blazing. As I slowed, the beams revealed something that made my stomach drop. A human figure sprawled across the asphalt. A woman lay there as though every bone had been taken from her. She wasn't twisted like somebody with broken limbs. She was folded in a way I can barely describe. I'll give it a try, though. Imagine a pile of clothes dropped from a height that's the closest I can really come from. Like her hair fanned across the road perfectly still in the cold night air. No blood, no torn fabric, just wrong. A couple stood beside the car, with their breath faint clouds in the chill. The man lingered at the edge of the light, silent and rigid. The woman was on her phone, murmuring something I assumed to be 911. She met my eyes only once and said calmly, almost too calmly, "You can keep going." There was no panic, no frantic waving. It was as if they had been expecting me to stop and to leave. I hesitated, but the strangeness in her voice made me obey. So I eased past them, the sound of gravel under my tires unnervingly loud. A few miles later, an ambulance sped in the opposite direction, lights strobing through the black fields. For days, I scoured local news sites and there was nothing. No accidents reports. No woman found on Country Road. It was as if the night had swallowed the event whole. I've replayed it endlessly. If they'd hit her, the car should have shown damage. It gleamed spotless under those headlights. Even if she had wandered out there on foot, how could her body end up like that? No visible trauma, no blood. And sometimes I wonder if I actually saw what I think I saw. Other nights I remember the wife's calm, almost rehearsed words, and the way the man never once looked up. And I know I did. It's been months, but the image of that shape on the road, the impossible way a body can look when nothing adds up, hasn't left me. Moonlight Stranger. Before I start, let me set the scene. I live in Canada, and if you've ever heard Native American stories, you'll know that skinwalkers are a big deal here. Everyone I've talked to around our family's rural property has their own eerie encounters, similar enough to mine that it still gives me chills. Here's what happened. Our family owns a piece of land a few hours outside of the city, quiet and remote. And late one autumn night, about midnight, the full moon was unbelievably bright. It lit up the field so clearly, I could see far beyond what was normal for that hour. My dad was inside the old farmhouse that we were fixing up, leaving me outside to breathe in the crisp night air. And then, from the forest about 300 feet away, there came a strange, drawn-out cry. It sounded like something wounded. I told myself it was just a coyote. There are plenty of those around here. 5 minutes passed. I was fiddling with my phone when I sensed something. I turned, and there it was. A white dog stood barely 10 feet away. Its coat glowed in the moonlight, but something about it felt wrong, and at first I blamed my tired eyes. I love dogs. I ducked into her small camper to grab a couple of treats. I keep them there for my own pup. I stepped closer, and I greeted it softly. The animal did not move. There was no wagging tail, no shifting paws, just stillness. When I looked closer, the unease sharpened. Its eyes were almost human, round, watchful, unsettling. I offered a treat. It didn't even blink. And suddenly its head jerked toward the woods where the city cry had come from. Then back to me. It repeated that motion, forest, me, forest, 4 times. Like it was caught in some silent signal I couldn't hear. Then it locked eyes with me for so long, like a cold 5 seconds, bolted straight toward the dark tree line. Hard racing, I dashed back into the camper. I grabbed my dad's shotgun, kept watching through the window, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shape moving between the trees, but the shadow swallowed it before I could be sure. Could it have been a wandering farm dog? Well, maybe. But everything about it, the human-like eyes, the unnatural calm, the perfectly timed cry in the woods felt too precise and too strange. When I later shared the story, neighbors told me of similar encounters. They were convinced that they were skinwalkers. I can't prove what I saw. Maybe it was nothing more than a coincidence. But under that glaring moonlight, it felt like something far older was watching me. Dream on the Edge of Dawn. Let me set the stage. my family's relationship with my aunt, my father's brother's wife. It's been broken for years, fractured beyond repair. And it began long before I was even aware of the politics. But things erupted after tragedy struck. Her eldest son died during the COVID wave. That's when the property war began. Police complaints, death threats against my father. And for context, the house at the heart of it all was paid for by my father back in the 2000s. But the loan was taken out under his brother's name. On paper, it was never ours, and my father kept quiet for years, trying to be the honorable one. But when they moved to sell, he finally stepped in, and 2021 turned into a battlefield. The last time I saw that side of the family was March 17th, 2021. I was still technically a kid, but already used to the emotional blackmail that had shadowed me since I was small. None of us had fondness left for them. Fast forward, and my father, despite all the bitterness, secretly stayed in touch with his niece, his late brother's daughter. He'd record conversations and then delete them, unaware of the recently deleted folder on his phone. I'd listen and learn what they really thought of us, how they gossiped about my health, my mom, and everything. I confronted him once. I laid out what I knew. After that, he got more careful and started clearing even the recently deleted folder. Yesterday evening, I casually asked him, "Have you spoken to anyone in the last couple of days?" He said no, and I believed him. But I told him about a dream I'd had. In the dream, he had invited his niece and nephew over while Mom was away. I confronted her about the things she'd said behind her backs. She apologized. Then came a strange turn. She said, "Dimple has scratches on her neck and chest." Dimple is my cousin, her younger sister. That's a weird name. In the dream, I asked, "Her child is already 5. How could this happen?" I woke up unsettled. Like just last month, something in our extended family died in an incident of domestic violence. So for a moment, I wondered, was my dream some sort of warning? I must ask my father if Dimple was okay, but stopped myself. We don't talk to them. The only updates we ever get come from that niece. Then came the dawn. At 5:45 a.m., my father's phone rang. It was her. Dimple had passed away during the night. I froze and my heart hammered and my anxiety was rising like a tide. I had barely slept, and now this. And here's the strangest part. I wasn't close to Dimple. Not really. But unlike her sisters, who've caused their share of pain, she had never wronged me, my sister or my mother. She'd always been kind in the few encounters that we shared. And now I sit here, numb. Was that pure coincidence, a quiet intuition, or something else entirely? I don't know. All I know is that sometimes the distance between the world of dreams and the world of waking life is far thinner than we want to believe. The twin in the hallway. I kept this to myself for years, partly because speaking it aloud felt like tempting something I didn't want to name, but here it is. Maybe someone else has a clue. It started in early 2022, when my mom and I took a short trip to Savannah, Georgia. Not New Orleans this time, though the city had the same heavy, restless air that makes you feel watched. Because you very well might be, from my experience. My mom loves anything haunted, so she dragged me to a candlelit ghost walk She dragged me to old cemeteries and a strange place called the House of Shadows Museum. Halfway through that museum, right when the exhibit shifted from elegant funerary history to grim displays about infamous murders, my stomach turned inside out. The walls tilted and my skin went cold. I barely made it outside before throwing up. On the walk back, something clung to me. That's the only way I can describe it. You know, when someone's right behind you, almost touching the back of your neck, and every nerve knows it. That feeling. The rest of the trip was wrong. Our hotel door unlocked itself more than once while we tried to sleep. I had misplaced a whole sketchbook I'd carried for years and it never turned up. Mom's credit card disappeared, only to slide back into her wallet after we'd gotten home. We even drove past a fresh triple car crash where rescue lights still hadn't arrived. Mom said something had hitched a ride, and she talked to the air in the car the whole way back, giving whatever it was a name. Oh, I don't remember it, but promising that it could ride along if it left when we reached home. I didn't believe her, not really. Until we got back. That night around 3 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom. My room opened to a hallway facing the living room where my mom was sleeping on the fold-out couch. The bathroom door was just to my right. Moonlight and the soft blue of the TV filled the house. I noticed Mom sitting upright on the couch, hunched and wild-haired, staring at a cold fireplace. I whisper-called her name. There was no answer, so I called louder. Slowly, her head turned toward me, but the rest of her didn't move. Then the bathroom door to my right opened, and my mom stepped out, rubbing her eyes. "What's wrong? I'm in here," she said. I snapped my head back to the couch. Empty. Since that night, the double hasn't left quietly. Sometimes it knocks on my door or calls me by my nickname, a nickname only my mother uses, which is Bug. Friends have heard it, and only old friends refused to video chat if my door was open. She would swear she would catch glimpses of somebody who almost looked like Mom drifting past. When we moved to a 2-story house, the voice began calling from the base of the stairs late at night, waking my real mom, even though she never remembered why she'd been stirred, which is, well... Aside from that, it never once used my actual name. It would only call me Bug. 2 years and another moved silent for now. But I still feel, at least some nights, that breath of presence just behind my neck waiting. The hotel called Father. Last night I tumbled into one of those sprawling cinematic dreams where every door opens to a stranger scene. It began in a creaky old hotel. It's a hotel where my family, parents, and uncle and aunt, my younger cousin, and my fading grandmother shared a single room. Animals padded in and out like they owned the place. Cats on the windowsill, a couple of dogs under the beds, and inexplicably, a goat that wandered through as if checking in for the night. Awesome. The bathroom rebelled early. My mom went to unclog the toilet and triumphantly fished out a small turtle slick in muck. Nobody seemed shocked. And the hotel itself was a shapeshifter. Each day it reinvented itself as a different horror set. First, a smoky murder mystery parlor. Then a web-strung nightmare of spiders. I told a staff member I was terrified of spiders, and they all laughed. Irritated, I found myself scrolling through articles about whether dismissing someone's irrational phobia violated human rights. Apparently it might. In a corner shop, Attached to the lobby, I noticed a packet of gummy bears floating in some glowing liquid. The label promised that they were laced with a psychedelic something. I ate one, naturally. Instantly, I was behind the wheel. No, the handlebars of a bicycle pulling a shopping cart full of beer. The bottles shattered one by one, the sound crisp and echoing. I had been playing a trucking simulator for a minute before, and now I was apparently hauling cargo through the streets in my mind. At a lonely bus stop under a bridge, I met a tattooed boy and his cheerful father, who casually offered me a joint. Only then did I remember I was high. The night deepened. I wandered into a petrol station with a glass of rum in my hand while an overhead tannoy grew more menacing, warning that I would set myself on fire if I didn't leave. The voice swelled until it seemed to press onto my ribs. At one point, I ducked under a car. I looked around. Sure, I was in Maastricht. I can't say that correctly. Maastricht. Oh. A place that sounds very German in Holland. Maastricht. Though nothing quite matched. Later, I nearly walked into a stranger's house that looked exactly like the hotel. Children darted about, and one of them trailing me with endless questions until another lured him away. I woke briefly with my heart pounding. Then I fell back into sleep. And this time, I was seated at a diner with my family. I was having dinner, and I knew it was a dream because the air buzzed with that lucidity. I asked my mother where we were. Everybody lowered their menus at once, and their faces suddenly unreadable. "In father," she said. "Where?" "The town where your grandfather's father came from." Her words hung like smoke, because my grandfather's father was Irish, but there's no Irish town called Father. And then I woke for real. My grandmother, who had been fading in the dream, passed away the same day. All my dreams usually unfold in a familiar imaginary city stitched together from places I've lived. But this one felt different. Its own country of symbols, animals arriving uninvited, turtles emerging from the dark, warnings in the air. A hotel that shifts from murder to spiders to something unnamed. A hotel called Father. I used to have dreams about giant grasshoppers. It doesn't sound scary till you see them. Unrelated, sorry. The house that followed me. When I was between 5 and 7, my parents, my older brother, and I lived in a rented house that seemed stitched together from nightmares. Every night, shapes walked the halls, shadows that weren't quite shadows. They weren't just patches of darkness. They stood upright, like people without faces, almost solid with limbs and the faint suggestion of eyes. My brother and I, being children, we treated it like a strange game, chasing the silhouettes, until they melted into the dark outline of a door frame and vanished. It might sound like the fever dream of an overactive imagination, except my brother swore that he saw them too. Years later, when I brought it up, my mother admitted that she sometimes glimpsed small gnome-like figures moving quickly in corners. My dad only muttered something about seeing things once or twice, but his tone said more than his words. My brother, grown and embarrassed, denied everything, but I remember the way he clung to me back then. He absolutely saw them. From ages 4 to 7, something else began visiting me at night, something far worse. I can only describe it as a creature, I'd much later recognized in the Alien vs. Predator films, though I'd never heard of those movies at the time. The first night I caught a glimpse of it, I froze still, and after that I never dared look again. But I knew when it was coming. I'd pull the blanket over my head with my heart hammering. Then it would creep in, and I could feel its breath through the covers, heavy and cold, like it was tasting my fear. And for years after we moved, more than a decade, I still slept cocooned beneath my blanket, face covered. It's a reflex I can't quite shake. Sometimes I tried to escape by sleeping in my parents' room, but their room had its own menace. On the wall hung an old black eagle plaque, left behind by previous tenants, and at night it seemed to unhook itself and become a crow, circling in the room in slow, deliberate arcs. Whether it was real or a dream, I can't say, but I remember its beating wings and the sound of air moving. The house itself had a way of infecting others. We moved about 20 miles away, but each Halloween, we returned to trick-or-treat in our old neighborhood, and every time new tenants lived there, and every family's story ended pretty badly. The first couple we met, they seemed normal enough, but a year later, they'd split amid whispered fights and restraining orders. The next renters, they got caught stealing the landlord's appliances, one of them ending up in jail. It was like the house wanted chaos and kept calling new victims. For a long time, the haunting stopped. By 17, high school had replaced fear with routine, until the day that I saw her. She appeared in the hallway like somebody out of a dream you don't want to remember. A pretty girl at first glance, but something shifted like the closer she was coming. A subtle limp, a blank face, and around her, though invisible, a darkness I could feel, the same oppressive wrongness as the creature from my childhood. I forced myself to shrug it off. Weeks later, a friend who loved anything dark and strange told me about a quiet girl in her art class who drew disturbing pictures. She showed me sketches, figures with too many eyes or twisted bodies, all of them in impossible shapes. Before I could think, I asked, "Is this Ashley's?" And I didn't even know anyone by that name. She blinked, kind of surprised. "Yeah, how did you know?" Soon after, Ashley erupted during lunch. Witnesses said she climbed onto a cafeteria table and screamed, "I'm gonna rip your fucking guts out," before lunging at another student. Principal intervened, but Ashley never came back. Whew. Yeah. Even now I wonder, did the house follow me through her, or was it all a coincidence? Or does something dark, something that once stood breathing over my bed, still wander, waiting for another doorway to slip through? The Ice Cream Fairy. Ferry, which is a shame. Last summer, my 11-year-old Cavalier Spaniel passed away. He was my shadow, my couch buddy, and my best food critic. Until then, I'd never had anything remotely supernatural happen to me. Yet after his death, I found myself aching to see him again. Just once, out of raw, restless grief. I read online about people who'd hear phantom paws on the stairs or would catch glimpses of glowing fur. And strangely, nothing like that ever happened to me. No scratch at the door, no soft bark in the night. In time, I decided, well, it fit his nature. My boy wasn't complicated. He was sunshine wrapped in fur, loving and spectacularly clueless. I can relate to that. If I hid a treat under a napkin in plain sight, he'd sniff the carpet for 10 minutes, and then he'd give up with a wag. A soul that guileless, I thought, wouldn't linger. He'd head straight for heaven, never turned around to think. But then, months later, there came a dream as sharp and solid as waking life. I stood on the upper level of a vast wooden ferry. Though roofed like an old ballroom, every archway opened to salt eye and pale sky. I'd never felt such a calm, full happiness. It wasn't simply that I was at peace. It was as if the place itself was peace made real. That sounds nice. Outside, gold sand stretched on forever. Tiny figures strolled along the shore under pastel parasols. And on the decks around me, people chatted over tall drinks, dressed like a 1950s holiday postcard. Sailor stripes, braid skirts, summer hats. The low murmur of laughter drifted like music. By the railing stood a man at an ice cream cart, striped apron, white cap. He smiled with a quiet recognition, as if he'd been expecting me. I walked over and I asked the question. It'd been living on my chest for months. Could I see him? The vendor's eyes warmed. "You may not come," he said. "He's busy with the children." Before I could answer, a small blur bounded into the cart, ears flying, tail wagging. My spaniel. He hadn't spotted me at first, nose twitching toward the ocean of parasols. Then his head jerked around and those big brown eyes went comically wide. He launched himself at me in one joyous leap, and I caught him, buried my face into his fur, soft and real. And in that perfect moment, the world faded. I woke with his warmth still in my arms. How dare you make me feel? Midnight Frost. Now, I know this won't win any horror awards, and it might read like every other late-night ghost story out there. Still, it was strange enough to stick with me, so here goes nothing. I worked the overnight shift at a lonely little gas station off the county highway. And after midnight, it's nothing but the steady hum of drink coolers and the occasional creak of ice chests outside. One slow Tuesday, about 2:45 a.m., I was lining up snap bags on the shelf. Snack bags, excuse me. That's when 3 sharp knocks tapped on the glass door. Not a bang, just crisp, deliberate knocks. I figured it was a trucker who'd missed the rest stop, or maybe some kid looking for a ride. But when I turned, the doorway was empty. I stepped outside to check anyway. The parking lot had laid wide and flat under a thin crust of frost. No cars, no footprints, not even the faint trail of an animal. I chalked it up to a branch brushing the door, and I went back in, locking it more out of habit than worry. Roughly 20 minutes later, the same 3 knocks sounded, exact rhythm, same spot on the glass, and this time I stayed put, my eyes fixed on the door, and that's when I saw it. On the inside of the pane, exactly where the sound had come from, was the print of a small hand, perfect and sharp and pale against the cold glass. It wasn't mine, too small, too precise. And when I touched the glass, it was still icy, as though the night itself had reached in. Still thinking about ice cream. The quiet river beyond. In 2008, My aunt married a man who quickly became more like an older brother than an uncle. He spoiled me with kindness, remembered every small wish I ever mentioned, and always had a joke ready when I felt that life was heavy. Then in 2015, he passed away suddenly, in a way so astonishing and strange that it deserved its own telling someday. For a while after, I only met him in faint, forgettable dreams. But one night, during a season when I was drowning in hopelessness and dark thoughts, he returned, vivid and present. In the dream, he looked at me gently and asked, "Do you want to come with me?" I shook my head. He smiled and said he just wanted to show me where he now lived, and I agreed just to take a look. So we walked through what felt like a dark, endless tunnel, and yet it really wasn't frightening. At the far end, light poured in, but not from any sun. The sky itself seemed to glow. There were tall trees stripped of leaves, their silhouettes calm and dignified, and a perfectly clear river flowing over pebbles and silver fish. The air was almost still and almost sacred. I felt peaceful and uneasy all at once, and after a while, I told him I wanted to go back, and he nodded and I woke up. Months later, I dreamed of him again, and this time he sat together with me and we were beside that quiet river again. He said only this: "Here is home for me now." And then, as before, he brought me back. Years rolled by, and on a road trip with a friend, I met a stranger with scars and stitches running across his arms and neck. And over coffee, he told me of a terrible accident that left him in a coma. And then he described the place that he'd gone. A world with no sun, yet full of light. Bare trees, like something I can't even describe. And a clear stream lined with fish and stones. The only difference is he had seen a white, faceless figure watching from the shore, and I was stunned. How could two lives, one asleep, one suspended between life and death, cross paths in the same unseen landscape? Still can't name what that place is. Maybe it's a threshold, or maybe a promise, or maybe something beyond words. What do you think that river really is? We all got a name for that. Nice knowing there's fish, though, and rocks aren't alive. The black shape beyond the pines. It must have been about 6 summers back when I signed up for a military-style camp. It was a place hidden somewhere deep in Lithuania's pine-choked nowhere. The place was gorgeous. Tall, dark trees as far as you could see. The air sharp with resin. Our daily grind was standard. Dawn wake-ups, flagpole ceremonies, endless drills. Nothing special. Then came hiking day. We stuffed our packs and headed out with one of the counselors, trudging through forest trails for what felt like forever. Probably 3 hours until he stopped and grinned. "All right," he said. "This is home for tonight." Wait, tonight? Nobody had mentioned an overnight in the woods. But there we were, suddenly tasked with building shelters from branches and moss. While we sweated over makeshift huts, the counselor got creative, I guess you could call it. First, he pulled an animal jawbone out of the dirt. Then he lashed it to a stick with twine. It was kind of shaman style. Next came a rain-soaked frog, skewered with a knife and tied to the grisly staff like some woodland totem. Creepy as hell, but mesmerizing nonetheless. By sunset, the forest dimmed to a shadowy blue. We tried to spark a fire using a ferro rod and a knife, striking till our wrists ached. Everything was just too damp. There was no flame. So me and 2 friends, we volunteered to find drier wood. So we wandered maybe 7 minutes before spotting a lone birch in a little clearing. Almost too perfect, like a painting half remembered. We tugged and snapped at its limbs for 10 long minutes until a noise froze us. Sharp cracking of branches somewhere deeper in the dark. We swung our 1 weak flashlight toward the sound and saw it. A black shape, massive, hunched on 4 limbs, 3 meters tall at least. The light barely touched it. So at first it seemed like a dense shadow, a trick of tired eyes, until it shifted. 1 long limb slid forward with deliberate weight. Instinct took over. We bolted. Don't think I've ever run that fast. Back at camp, we tumbled into the circles breathless, blurting out something into the woods. No one believed us. A group of older kids grabbed a light to check, but minutes later they came sprinting back, pale and wide-eyed themselves. That's because they'd seen it too. Our counselor, still holding his nightmare staff, finally told us to pack. No fire, no food, just a hard 2-hour march through pitch-black forest, every step echoing with the thought of something being behind us. We reached camp huts well past midnight. Nobody in our cabin sleeping, so could it have been a shadow or a moose or pure exhaustion? Maybe, but even now when I walk alone in a forest, I sometimes remember that clearing and the black shape that leaned toward us. I'm always asking myself if it's a moose or pure exhaustion. Midnight on Clay Road. I'll dive right in. I'm from southern Mississippi. About 12 years back, my fiancée, her buddy, and I moved into a small trailer tucked deep off Red Clay Road outside of Florence. The place sat on a quiet horse ranch. Just one neighbor sort of way down the gravel stretch. My fiancée found it through a Craigslist ad that almost felt too good to be true. 8,000 red flags raised. And for a while, it was too good. Peaceful nights, crickets singing, the faint smell of hay. And then things started getting wrong. First, it was the blankets. We'd be asleep and feel the quilt slowly sliding down, inch by inch, until the cold woke us and we yanked it back. And then on mornings when the guys left early for work and I went back to sleep, the house would come alive. Twice I was jolted awake by a deafening slap against the marble-top nightstand beside my head, so hard the air puffed my hair upward. Nothing was there, but I swear it was meant to wake me. One morning, it went further. I felt someone spooning me from behind, arms wrapped around my arms, legs tangled with mine, the warmth of a body and the soft press of a kiss on my cheek. I murmured my fiancée's name. I turned over with a sleepy smile. I faced nothing but the cool, empty sheets. I hate that. Every single night, Every single night, at exactly 3 a.m., the front door thundered like somebody trying to break it down. My fiancée would creep up and fling it open mid-bang, only to meet the still, star-pale porch. The pounding stopped the instant the door swung wide. One Friday, we decided to stay up and catch the culprit, gaming in the living room until almost 3. Suddenly, I heard a faint hiss of water. The washing machine, empty, was running. Though you had to pull a stubborn metal lever to start the water because we could process that, the door began again. The door banging. We charged to the entryway, flung it open, and nothing. Silence so heavy it felt like a weight. The worst came on a humid, cicada-loud evening, when the air itself seemed to split open. A man and a woman's voice just started roaring from nowhere, and it was vicious and raw. "I hate you. You'll regret this." I circled the trailer, barefoot in the dirt, searching. Not a soul. Back inside, the shouting was somehow louder, like the walls themselves were screaming. No TV, no radio, only us there. The moment we left, the nightmare ended. We've lived in 3 different places since. Never a single unexplainable sound. But I still think about that trailer on Red Clay Road, about the invisible hands that pulled our blankets, the breath on my cheek, and the door that banged only when no one was there. Some nights I wonder if that lonely horse ranch holds a story older and darker than we dared to learn. And every now and then, I still wake up at 3 a.m., my heart hammering, listening for the knock that isn't there. The forest that breathed hunger. It was late September 2016, my 3rd year of college, and for 7 nights straight, my friend Bada and I had been sneaking into the Buli Batayari forest after dark, chasing the kind of thrill that makes you forget exams and sleep. Most nights were still, haunted by silence but harmless. But that first night, that night never left me. Bada's bike hummed along the dirt trail until he suddenly slammed on the brakes. His face hardened. "Want to see a dead body?" he asked, his voice low like he was daring the dark to answer. I got a half laugh. "Hard pass, thanks." "Too late," he said, turning the handlebars so the headlight cut through a thicket of crooked trees. There it was, a man face down in the dust, his limbs bent as if somebody had forgotten how a human should fold. I edged closer and I nudged him with my shoe, waiting for a breath, a twitch or anything. Nothing. The stillness was so absolute it felt like the forest was holding its breath with him. I told myself he was just some drunk passed out cold, and I needed that story to be true. We left for our usual hangout spot. We roped a few friends into coming back to see the dead guy. But when we returned minutes later, he was gone. All that remained were long, dragging tracks leading deeper into the trees. Maybe his buddy carried him off, I muttered, forcing logic into the space where fear lived. But something inside me whispered a harder truth. The nights after, they sort of unraveled into a nightmare of small impossibilities. Shadows that didn't match their owners, voices that vanished when chased, and by the 4th night, no more bodies appeared. That should have been a relief, but it wasn't. So one evening we gathered around a fire with 2 other wandering groups, laughter and smoke rising like we could out-joke the forest. And that's when I heard it, faint rustling, circling us in a perfect ring. Too deliberate to be wind, too patient to be an animal. The sound tightened its loop until it drowned everything else out. Then absolute silence. 2 minutes, maybe more. My pulse became the only noise. When it came back, it wasn't a circle. It was everywhere at once. Branches snapped in impossible directions. The trees themselves seemed to lean closer. My body froze under pressure I can only call predatory. It was the sensation of a hand almost touching the back of your neck, only colder and older and hungrier. Then something or someone, or maybe not someone at all, it brushed the air behind me, and I swear I felt its intent, heavy and sharp as teeth. Instinct broke the spell. I bolted for the bike and yelled at Bada to head for the Bangali Sahib Gurudwara, the only safe place I could name, and a difficult name to pronounce. But the eerie part is every other group ran too, as if chased by the same invisible hunger. And later, when asked why, each described the same suffocating presence, the same phantom breath of their necks. That was the last time I stepped inside Buli Batiyari. Some forests don't just hold secrets, they feed on them. Static between worlds. It all unfolded in barely half of an hour. 1 minute my living room was quiet. The next, my soundbar became something else. More like a ghost box from late-night paranormal shows. At first, it hissed and pulsed with garbled metallic chatter. Then, as if telling me, the noise stretched into warped fragments of music, speeding up and slowing down. Out of curiosity, I whispered, "Slow down." And it did. Faster. And again it obeyed. After the music dissolved, a strange collage of overlapping voices came through. News snippets about poisoned reservoirs, government cover-ups, shifting weather systems. Then silence. The first clear words it chose were almost casual. "See ya." I froze with my heart pounding, but wonder outweighed the fear, and moments later it spoke my name. What followed felt impossibly intimate. It recalled half-forgotten moments, childhood dreams I never wrote down, odd coincidences I never confessed to anyone. The voice said it had always been near and watching and guarding. When I asked how we were speaking, it replied simply, "Frequency." "Where are you?" I asked. "Fourth dimension." We'd traded questions and answers for a while, though some had ignored, like why or how. And the conversation darkened near the end. Bad ones everywhere. Don't look in their eyes. Government always watching. Finally, I go now. Silence again, heavy and absolute. Since that night, I keep replaying everything, trying to puncture the mystery. Maybe somebody hacked the speaker, but who could weave together such a private thing like those memories? Things even my family wouldn't know, and for what purpose? Just to issue warnings laced with comfort. It felt like an intense lucid trip, like waking from a vivid dream only to realize the world hasn't changed, except that now it has. And the question that lingers isn't what happened, but whether the voice will ever return again. Rover in the afterlight. My family's always been different. Some of us can sense lies the instant they're told. Others glimpse spirits, catch flickers of the future, or feel a room's energy shift like a sudden draft. My own knack is subtle. I feel vibrations and moods in a place the moment I step inside. Sometimes I even get flashes of what's to come. But my most unusual gift is the one I never expected. My spirit dog. Let's call him Rover to be simple. I call him my spirit because he's behaving like a real dog. playful and curious and aware of change, rather than a mere ghost or echo. He followed me when I moved apartments, padding faithfully across thresholds no living creature could cross. 3 years ago, the earthly rover left this world, and he'd been with me for over 20 years now. And one quiet afternoon, his spleen ruptured from a hidden tumor. We rushed him through emergency surgery, and he survived this splenectomy. Even wagged his tail for me. But 6 days later at home, his heart finally just gave out. And everyone says their dog is special, and Rover truly was. He'd appeared in my life like a small miracle, abandoned in a busy part of town. Yet somehow he found me at midnight as if guided, and our bond was instant and unshakable. He ignored most people, even trainers. But one word had it for me, and he obeyed. He barked at things I couldn't see, especially at night, sending chills through me, and he mistrusted strangers instinctively, especially men. But even some women earned a wary growl. Eventually, I found a roommate, one Rover actually liked. And during night walks, the roommate often looked uneasy. When asked why, he admitted he could see spirits and other entities. Some, he said, had never been human at all. Most were harmless, little flickers of mischief. But sometimes, especially when Rover barked into the darkness, he glimpsed tall, shadowy figures with white faces and burning red eyes. And those were not harmless. He also claimed these things were drawn to me, especially in the quiet of the night. I hadn't mentioned my family's gifts, so my calm reaction startled him. I simply said, "Good to know," went back to my Netflix. After Rover passed, I could still sense him. I'd hear phantom toenails clicking across the linoleum, or I'd feel a warm weight on the bed. One evening, my roommate told me that he'd seen Rover cross over, but not as an old, frail dog. He described a young, healthy Rover, wearing a shiny new collar marked with silver paw prints. A week later, while building a memorial photo album, I showed him pictures of Rover as a young pup. He paled, pointed at the collar in one blurry shot and whispered, "That's it." Curious, I dug through an old shoebox. I pulled out the real collar, silver paw prints and all. He just nodded, still pale. Another week passed before I felt something stranger. At night, my arms and legs tingled as if it brushed by like a faint current. I joked about restless limb syndrome over dinner. My roommate looked at me and asked, "Do you feel it right now?" And when I said yes, he smiled softly. "That's not a syndrome," he said. "That's Rover. He's curled up on your lap." So maybe my dog never really left. Maybe he chose to stay. A loyal guardian padding just beyond the veil. Proof that love in its purest form doesn't die. It only changes its shape. The knitted clown that wouldn't stay put. So here's one for the "this can't be real" file. Because I was about 10, maybe 11. My little sister was around 8, and our cousins, who we practically lived with every weekend, came home one Saturday. They came with the weirdest thrift store find imaginable. A life-sized knitted clown. Yeah, exactly the kind of thing you'd not want in your house. From day one, the clown started breaking all the rules of normal toys. Our cousins would leave it propped neatly on a chair in their room. only to wake up and find it lounging on the kitchen counter or watching TV on the couch. And at first, everybody blamed each other. Someone's moving it as a joke. But nobody ever admitted to anything, and it kept happening. A few months later, we had a sleepover there. And by that time, the clown had gone from creepy decoration to absolute nightmare fuel. We decided brilliantly that, we thought, to lock it outside in the wooden shed. Their dad had used that place for garden tools. We double-latched the door and even checked twice. Next morning, it's sitting calmly in the living room like it owned the place. Our uncle finally said, "Enough," hauled the thing into the back of his pickup, pulling a dump run that afternoon. Good plan, right? Not quite. As later that day, the four of us were tearing around the back field on our mini ATVs, and we stopped for a drink, and that's when we saw it. The clown. Running. Not falling over, not blowing in the wind, running upright like a person through the tall grass about 50 meters away. We froze and nobody even screamed. We just watched with our hearts hammering. 10 seconds later, it melted into the weeds and it was gone. We kind of just sprinted to the adults. The truck bed was empty. No clown. Everyone searched the field. Nothing. No tracks, no torn yard, no clue. And that was the last time anybody ever saw it. So to this day, when we bring it up, we'll get that same chill. Sounds like a campfire story, I know, but we were there. Death's breathing. When I was about 7, I camped out on the floor of my mother's bedroom on the second floor of our creaky old house. I can't recall exactly why. Maybe I was pretending to be an explorer. Maybe I just wanted the comfort of hearing her breathing nearby. My blanket was spread right in front of her bed, and unluckily, directly in front of the closet door. It was closed, of course. Closets at night feel like they're holding their breath, so moving on. Sometime past midnight, I drifted in what I thought was a dream. Something was brushing my shoulder. Then it pressed down, a firm squeeze, followed by 2 cold hands. They were settling on my wrist. I couldn't move, and it's a nightmare, I told myself. Just wake up. But then I heard it, the sound of breathing. Slow and ragged with those eerie stops between gasps. And years later, as a hospice nurse, I'd learned the name. I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong. Shane Stokes. Back then, I only knew it as the sound of something dying right next to me. The air against my ear shifted as if someone had exhaled a whisper against my skin. Panic finally snapped me free. I shot up and screamed for my mother, and she was instantly awake, pulling me into her arms and rushing us downstairs without a single question. Downstairs, while I sobbed, she told my father something that froze me harder than the cold hands had. She said she'd been dreaming that she was watching me sleep when the closet door had creaked open. Out stepped a shape that she can only call a black skeleton. It slid to the floor beside me and lay down. I blurted out my own story, how something had held me and breathed into my ear. No one went back upstairs that night. The next morning, sunlight spilling in like nothing had happened, I crept upstairs for my favorite stuffed rabbit. The closet door stood wide open, and even now, my parents still live in that house. And even now again, every time I dream of it, the hallway smells faintly of dust and breath, and the closet door is never quite closed. The doorway that waited. Last winter, I, a 31-year-old female, I worked a short stint in the environmental services department of a busy city hospital. Basically housekeeping with a lot of bleach and a little bit of mystery. After a couple of months, I got a regular route on the step-down ICU. Some rooms had cameras they were streaming to the nurses' station, mostly the ones tucked out of direct sight. My job was a mix of the everyday and the eerie. Wipe down occupied rooms, tidy nurses' stations, freshen up doctors' cubbies, scrub public bathrooms, and when somebody was discharged, deep clean their room until it looked like nobody'd ever drawn a breath in there. One gray morning, I was assigned a full clean on a monitored room that was at the far end of the hall, just around a bend from the main station. After an hour of mopping and disinfecting, I stepped out, glanced at the monitor screen, and I froze. Someone tall, motionless, stood in the doorway that I had just walked out of. My heart slammed. I doubled back immediately. Empty. Not just the room, but the neighboring one too. Anyone leaving would have had to pass me. Yet when I checked the feed again, the doorway was blank. I told myself it was a camera glitch, and I forced my day back into its routine rhythm. A week later, the room got a new occupant. An elderly woman, pale and gentle, with the kind of faraway eyes that seemed to see two places at once. Went in to introduce myself, start the daily cleaning. The curtains were drawn, leaving the room kind of softly dim. As I dusted near her bed, she asked in a thin voice, "How many of us are here?" I hesitated. "Just you and me. Why, do you see someone else?" She gave a faint, puzzled smile. "Oh, perhaps not." I reassured her, pointing to the card by the bed. "If you need anything at all, press the button. They can page me." Still uneasy, I slipped around the corner to the monitor. The feed was ordinary, bed, curtain, nothing more. But that prickle at the back of my neck stayed. And after that, I made a quiet habit of passing that room several times a day. And I never again saw a figure in the doorway. But sometimes when I walked past, I caught myself slowing, as if something or someone was still waiting just out of view. Signals in the dark. My brother was diagnosed with HIV back in the late 80s. And for more than 20 years, we lived with the quiet certainty that the disease would eventually take him. He never hid from that truth. Instead, he leaned into the mystery of what comes after. He read books about the afterlife, collected little charms, even kept an old Ouija board in his closet. He would joke, half serious, that once he passed, he'd find a way to prove he was still around. Well, he outlasted every doctor's guess, but eventually the illness claimed him. A few weeks later, after we had shared his belongings among the family, I ended up with a piece of his everyday life, a battered brass touch lamp that he'd owned forever. 3 settings, low, medium, and high. Simple but steady, just like him. One quiet night, I'm on the phone with my mom, and she's a devout born-again Christian, by the way. The kind who believes doubt is almost a sin. And she told me, with that absolute certainty that only she can muster, that my brother had accepted Jesus at the very end and was safely in heaven. I hung up and lay in bed talking with my husband about it, about how my brother always swore spirits were real and promised that he'd send a sign. And then it happened. I stepped out to let the dog in, and behind me, the lamp clicked through its levels. Low, medium, high, again and again, a steady rhythm almost. My first thought was that my husband was playing with it. But when I turned, his face told me everything. And he's a big guy, the unshakable type. But he looked as if the blood had drained straight out of him. His hands were in his lap and he hadn't touched a thing. In that moment, I started to cry. I felt it. Not fear, but recognition. My brother had kept his promise, and he was okay. And the next day, I was on a 3-way call with Mom and my sister. And Mom predictably brushed it off. Faulty wiring, she insisted. Just coincidence. My sister, though, believed me instantly. And as Mom rattled on with explanations, that old lamp came on alive again. It was low, medium, high, low, medium, high. Like a silent signature only he could write. I didn't need more proof. My brother had found his way back, if only for a flicker of light in the dark. Midnight percussion. Lately, something downright unsettling has been happening in our bedroom. It crept in about a month ago. I'll be lying perfectly still, when without warning, the mattress beneath me thuds, like someone's drumming their fists upward from under the bed. The sound is sharp, the movement unmistakable. And at first it was a curiosity. The inaugural night, the punches were random and sparse. I convinced myself maybe it was nothing more than a settling floorboard. But the second time, perfectly spaced thumps, every 2 seconds like a metronome keeping an eerie time. A few days later, I felt 3 sharp jabs near my lower back, after one heavy hit near my shoulder. Then came last night. It was deep in the kind of sleep where dreams weigh like stone. A sudden barrage of rapid punches yanked me awake. It felt like somebody was drumming out a frantic rhythm, a song I didn't know, but I could feel in my bones. As soon as I sat up, the pounding stopped. Minutes later, subtle, scattered taps returned, as if testing whether I'd drift back to sleep. And my husband hasn't felt a thing, because each time he groggily checks beneath the bed, but there's never anything to find there. Just tightly packed storage bins where no person or creature of any size could hide. Now we've lived here for 3 quiet years, yet the more I think back, the less ordinary things seem. There's the faint musty scent that clings only to my side of the bed. One he insists that he can't detect, and there's almost nightly scratch sounds along the floorboards, which I once blamed on a mouse that I'd never seen, and for which there's never been a single dropping. And then there's that night, when he was away, still burns at the edge of my memory. I jolted awake to see, for a split instant, a man standing over me, his face split into a grin too wide to be human. I screamed so hard the air left me dizzy. I told myself it was a dream, but my heart didn't believe it. I could explain away a smell. I could explain away a phantom shadow, but the pounding, the deliberate, relentless drumming beneath my back, that defies explanation. The room down the hall. When I was 3, my parents moved us into a brand new house that they built on the edge of a sleepy cul-de-sac. Next door lived a boy my age. Let's call him Mark. From the first day, Mark and I were inseparable. We climbed trees, built pillow forts, swapped Halloween candy like seasoned traders. Yeah. His little brother, Simon, hovered on the edges, but he never liked sharing Mark with anyone, least of all me. When Mark turned 7, everything shifted. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Within months, he was gone. The cheerful house next door turned silent. His parents barely came outside for years, shutters drawn as if to hold the world away. By the time I was 11, Simon and I had kind of cautiously become friends. He had moved into Mark's old room, with the faded rocket stickers still clinging to the walls. And one warm afternoon, we sat cross-legged on the carpet, building an elaborate Lego city, when his mother poked her head in. "Can you keep an eye on Simon for an hour? I need to run to the market." I nodded and she left, locking the front door behind her. And 10 minutes later, 3 thunderous knocks rattled Simon's door. I froze with my hand gripping a half-built tower, and Simon barely blinked. He stood, opened the door, and stepped back as though greeting an invisible guest. And after a beat, he closed it again. My voice cracked. "Who was that?" I gave a little shrug. "Mark likes to check on me. Happens all the time." And it didn't stop there. A week later, while we were in the backyard, I glanced up toward my own attic window. A shadowed figure, human-shaped, was standing perfectly still inside. My mother swore nobody could get up there, and the swollen wood made the door impossible to open. Yet that night, the attic boomed and creaked like something was pacing. Soon, the sound spread through the house. Footsteps on empty stairs, doors rattling at 2 a.m., knocks on my bedroom door that seemed to jolt me awake, and my stepdad laughed about our resident ghost. But even he started pausing mid-sentence when a floorboard groaned at the wrong moment. My parents often asked why I was roaming the hall at 3 in the morning. Only I had never left my bed. And then came the night I can't forget. I was packing for a trip with my grandparents. Everyone else was asleep. When I turned off the light, breathing, loud and deliberate, filled the darkness beside me. The floor creaked, and in the corner, a child-sized shape glimmered faintly white. I hid under the blanket, paralyzed. The breathing drew closer until a warm hand pressed gently against my back. And after that, nothing. I woke up at dawn, sunlight kind of pricking my eyes. My right hand rested on the pillow, and another hand softly held it. The warmth was overwhelming, a perfect, wordless comfort. But then the thought hit. I'm alone. Both parents left before sunrise, and the warmth slipped away. Later, searching through old boxes, I found a photo of Mark. It was Mark and me grinning, gap-toothed in the backyard. I framed it, set it on my nightstand, and from that night on, the knocks and footsteps stopped, and I sometimes wonder if Mark only needed to know I remembered that he was still a part of my home and a part of me. And in a similar fashion, thank you for letting me be a part of wherever you're listening. Sweet dreams. Appreciate it.
Greetings. This is Paranormal M. Join us as we dive into the enigmatic stories that challenge conventional understanding. Consider supporting us by subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss a moment of our captivating narratives. I've seen various UFOs over the course of my life. The most notable and the most relevant ones are the ones that I saw with my brother and the one I saw with my wife. The one with my brother, we were out getting weed from a guy a few blocks away. We were sober until the trip back. I always have to clarify that part to people for some reason. And we see this spotlight attached to what appears to be an aircraft the size of a UH-1 Iroquois. Problem is, it isn't making no noise. Not a single sound. We can't really see the body, but a vague silhouette. We straight up pull over just to look at it. I even get out of the motherfucking car. Almost as if it knew that we were watching, it bolts out of there. A couple 100 miles an hour. Then, as quickly as it dipped, it jerks back the other way at an acute angle. Something like 270 degrees. Still no noise. This took place about 10 miles away from Lockheed Martin and Dobbins at around 3 a.m., Smyrna, Georgia. The one with the wife was a couple of weeks ago. 4 orbs above Lake Michigan. My wife says it's 5. We got a little Jean-Luc Picard Gull-Madrid argument going on about how many lights. It's kind of funny. Anyway, these lights are in line with Fond du Lac Avenue in Milwaukee. We were headed up northeast. Maybe it was over Lake Michigan, maybe Canada, I don't know. Looks about 30 or 40,000 feet. Lights are in pairs, from my perspective. Like headlights. Problem is, at that spacing, there's no way ATC would let 2 planes that size fly that close in overcast. Another issue, they aren't fucking moving. I thought they were coming straight on, but after 15 minutes, that theory was out. They also didn't have the green and red running lights, just steady white lights. I'm prepared to just write it off as a perspective thing. But then one light goes out, then another. They all went out one at a time. That's when I realized it was 4 individual craft and not 2. I also met a Gregor when I was a teenager, or an egregor. I was with a roommate. We had been casting a summoning circle for a Wiccan spell. We used to practice, but don't anymore after that. We were, I guess, a bit greedy with our spell, making prosperity charms for ourselves and not others. It may or may not have closed the circle properly. Afterward, during the witching hour, the hallway towards the room that we were casting in grew dark. We felt cold and felt paralyzed. The only thing we really saw was a shadowy figure lurching in his doorway. We were terrified. I only know how to classify whatever it was as an egregor because of all the monetary woe that followed me around for the next few years. Must have been that. I don't even like speaking its name, especially knowing I'm actually doing okay for once. I'm gonna go burn some fucking sage before I end up homeless again. I experienced a lot of weird things growing up. Most of them I can explain, but there was this one night I can't. I had a battery-powered travel DVD player on my bed late one night when I was 13. At the same time, my boombox was on, plugged into the wall. My dresser was up against a door I wasn't allowed to open. It was an unfinished space. It was originally meant to be a bathroom, but the previous owners just never finished it, and my parents had no intentions to. I was told I could possibly fall through the floor, so don't even open the door. While I'm watching my movie, suddenly my DVD player and boombox stop playing at the same time. And this sounds cliche as fuck, but I could hear what sounded like little girls laughing behind the door I was told never to open. My mom would scream at me if I woke her up for nothing, so I moved the dresser by myself. The giggling continued the whole process of moving my dresser. I put my hand on the doorknob and yanked it open. Giggling stops. The light in my room lights up the empty space. It's tiny, and it's just wood in there. There wasn't even tile or a mirror. I waited for a minute, closed the door. Still no giggling again. And then, suddenly, my boombox and DVD player resumed playing at the same moment. I've always wondered if it was some freaky lightning thing or what. I have 3 things happening. All of them happening in connection with the death of 3 different people. My grandfather, my father-in-law, and my grandmother, my grandfather's wife. My grandfather died at the hospital from pneumonia when he was old. A couple of days after that, a small lamp in the hallway in my grandmother's house started to flicker. The lamp had been there for at least 30 years or so, and there was never any problems with it. At least my grandmother said. We tried changing the light bulb, but the flickering continued, so we threw the lamp away due to potential electricity hazards. My father-in-law passed away a few years later due to a disease. A couple of days after his death, my wife and I woke up to the TV in the living room being turned on full volume, really loud, on some random channel that we had. That had never happened before, and we don't have any animals that could have touched the remote or the TV. My wife and I both were shocked, and we immediately said that it must be a sign from her father. By the way, I'm not religious at all, but interested in paranormal happenings. My grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's not long ago. I was with her when she took her last breath at the home for old people where she was living. A few days after, she died. And a lamp in my kitchen started to flicker. The lamp was almost new. The light bulb almost new as well. And the house almost new, 3 years. And it had never happened before. We let the flickering continue due to us seeing this as a sign from my grandmother. She and I were very close, and the flickering made me think that she was still with us. I told my wife when the flickering started, but I had heard from her brother-in-law, or maybe from someone else, that it takes 40 days for the dead person to pass to the other side, as it were. And I was counting the days the flickering continued. Exactly 40 days after the death of my grandmother, the flickering stopped. The 3 events combined made me think at least, or hope, that they wanted to say goodbye through the means that they had after death. My parents were on vacation, and I stayed home a longer period of time. On the 13th Friday night, my parents should have been back on Sunday. I called up a few friends at my house for a sort of party, and we stayed until 3 a.m. when my parents called them to go home. I went with them half the distance when we suddenly stopped in the middle of the street. We saw a bright light coming toward us, which seemed like the ones from a car, but it was only one. We moved on the left side of the road and let it pass, but it stopped 50 meters away. A really tall person got out of the car. and pointed at something in the sky. Before starting to run in our direction, suddenly the man, let's just say he was a man, screamed horrible and the streetlights went off. And at the moment that we returned back to my house and locked every door and window, we got so scared that we stayed up all night with the lights on and a knife on each of us. Next morning, I called my grandparents to check if they were all right and heard if anything weird was happening the night before. The encounter was right in front of their house. They said that they heard a scream, but nothing else. They offered to come to my house, to stay over there with us. We decided to turn to the news, and we saw something similar that happened in the other side of the the other side of the country. But the worst thing was that a few people were found dead in that instance. AskReddit. This is going to be long-winded, because I need to describe how my apartment looked like for this to really make sense. This was when I was very young. I don't know, maybe around the age of 7. I spent my childhood in an obscure Southeast Asian country, as my dad had a business there. We lived in a really big apartment, and it felt like a giant circular slice of a cylindrical apartment building. The whole apartment was weirdly designed. There was a single separating wall that went through the radius of my apartment. Most bedrooms and the living room were on one side of the radius, while the other side we used for guest rooms, laundry room, and storage. Our living room has a door, the only door that connects the livelier side to the creepy side of our apartment. That side of the apartment was always empty. It feels like there's 2 people at most of the times, either the maid or the maid and one of my family members. And not just that, we always get complaints from the maid about her feeling unnerved every time she entered that side of the apartment. One time she even claimed that she saw a silhouette of a lady standing over at the washing machine area. I agree with her on the creepy vibes of that side, but I've never really seen anything supernatural before. It feels like I'm being watched every time I enter the creepy side. My parents do not believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, so they always brush it off as just imagination or some illusion caused by lighting in the apartment. I tried to have the attitude or mindset because I didn't want to believe that supernatural stuff like ghosts were real. I had a Nintendo Entertainment System at that time, which I regarded as peak entertainment for kids. I could only play it at the end of every semester. The TV and my console were placed close to the separating wall, so every time I was gaming, I would be facing the wall and the door that connects to the creepy side. And for some reason, it was always open because my parents wanted some quote-unquote airflow or some nonsense. So this open door that leads to pitch darkness on the right side of my vision every time I was watching TV or playing video games. One awful night, I was the only one in the living room playing my NES. My parents were downstairs with my uncle and his wife, singing songs and talking about the good old days. I wasn't interested, so I was alone, upstairs, on my Nintendo, playing Gradius, just moments before that thing traumatized me. From my peripherals, I saw something white dash out of the creepy side through that door of the pitch darkness. I freaked out and turned to look at what it was, to see if it was one of my family members. I still can't remember what I saw clearly. It was kind of humanoid, but for some reason my eyes couldn't make out the specific features. It was like a white, vaguely humanoid blur running around. I can't even be sure if it was running because normally a human's movement has some vertical motion to it, like a bobbing up and down motion, because of how our legs work, right? That white blur moved strictly horizontally, no up-down motion at all, like it's just gliding towards me at full speed. I don't know why it was so fucking fast, because by the time I reacted, it had already turned and was making its way toward me. I dropped my controller, screamed very loudly, and ran down to my parents and my relatives. I didn't even turn around. I started crying and telling my mother all about it. They were skeptical at first, but probably after seeing me shaking like crazy, my dad and uncle went up to see if there was an intruder or something. They came back down like 10 minutes later, saying there's nothing up there. The window and the doors were locked from the inside. No signs of a break-in, and the rug or mat placed on the door that leads to the creepy side was unmoved. The conclusion they came to was that I've been playing too many games and I'm just imagining things. This was the one and only paranormal thing I've witnessed, and it left me traumatized. I just hit 25, basically a full-grown adult, but you'll never find me in a dark place alone. I also learned to sleep with the lights on because of that. As an adult, I tried rationalizing what I saw. At first, I thought someone was pulling a sick joke on a child like me, but it didn't make sense because one, that was just going too far. No sensible adult would do that. And two, there were only 5 people, including me, at my apartment that night. 4 of them were downstairs, and I wouldn't have seen anyone going that to the creepy side because they would have to go through me. I also tried to convince myself that it was just an illusion, that I was just imagining things, but I've had these quote-unquote corner of my eye movements, where if I turned to look at it, it would just disappear or be something else. This was not that kind of movement. When I turned my gaze to it, I can still see it, gliding towards me. Its position and motion were consistent the whole way. That white blur was so real to me. Back when I was in middle school, I believe the 6th grade, I had just got home from school. I was always alone after school. My siblings all participated in after-school activities, and the parents were working. I walked to the kitchen to grab a snack from the fridge. And as I got to it, out of nowhere, I just got this overwhelming sensation of dread. There was a chair right to the right of the fridge, and I collapsed into it, and just had my head held down with my eyes shut. As I was trying to gather myself, I quickly realized that it was completely silent, like no sound whatsoever, as if the whole house I was in had been muted by a remote control. All of a sudden, a loud noise came from underneath the chair I was in. Best way I can describe it, it sounded like somebody just aggressively crumbling up a sheet of paper. With how quiet it was just before, I was starting to just leap out of the chair. Just as I jumped up to my feet, I quickly spun around, facing the chair. Then I just hear running footsteps coming from the hallway right behind me, leading to the front of the house, followed by a little girl giggling. I backed myself into the wall with my eyes fixated on the door leading to the hallway. and slowly slid myself to the back door. As I reached it, I bolted out of there and ran down the street to my friend's house. I called my mom and told her what had happened, and she told me to stay out until the others had gotten home first. Biggest and most notable experience was my first. We moved into our house when I was 6, currently 21, and for the first few weeks there weren't any issues. Then my parents wanted to look in the attic, which for some reason I was very adamant that they didn't, like continuously asking them not to open it. And I remember being uneasy. As soon as they popped it open, I saw just a dark hole. I was immediately confused because there was nothing there. I had not had any prior knowledge of ghosts and such at that time, so I just didn't know why I was so freaked out when seemingly nothing was there. Soon after that, I started seeing this girl sitting on our stairs. Our inside stairs to the second floor was lattice work below the railing, so it's got like a little grid section that you can see out of. She would sit a bit past the middle of the steps, look out the lattice, and place one hand partially in one of the lattices. And every time she sat there, she would just stare at us as if she was missing something. And she freaked me out because I started to notice nobody else was bothered by her at all. After a while, my mom noticed me staring up there, weird expression and all. And so she asked me about it, and I told her there was a girl sitting on our steps. My mother having had a paranormal experience with her first husband, many years before I or my dad were part of her life, she believed me. So she slowly went to the stairs and pointed at her, like, right there? What does she look like? She's sitting here? The girl responded to my mom. Not ever talking, but in her body language. She looked nervous and fearful of what my mom's intent was. Before climbing the stairs that my mom just flicked on the light, girl disappeared. Turned it off, girl was there. While she was making her way up the steps, she got maybe a quarter up, and then the girl ran up the rest of the stairs, disappearing as her foot hit the top step. I don't know how long I saw her after that point, but she always looked sad, dirty, or bruised. I couldn't tell. Really old, raggedy-looking nightie. But otherwise looked like a normal kid. Wasn't like mad creepy or anything. The last day I ever saw her, she was sitting on the stairs as usual. And at some point, she made eye contact with me. And immediately her face turned to fear. Her eyes widened, and she looked genuinely horrified. All I saw was a large man-looking hand grab her forearm and start pulling her up the stairs aggressively. Pulling as you would when a kid is arguing to not go, but harshly in this case. That's the worst part about it all that I can remember. It was the horrified look on her face. She'd never looked like that before. As always, when she hit the top step, she disappeared, and I never saw her again after that. I drew her months to a year later, but my art skill wasn't particularly great as a 7 or 8-year-old. And I have no idea where it is now, if we still even have it. This is far from the only experience I've had in this house, but by far the biggest/first one I ever had, so it really stuck with me. I think about her from time to time and hope that she's okay, as she can be, something that I consider to be my first. and I felt really helpless at the time, just having to watch it take place and not being able to help her. I was working in a building that was built in the early 1900s as a Catholic hospital. It's now an assisted living home, and I happen to work the night shift. I've experienced a plethora of things, as well as coworkers. Here's a list of some of them. There are 4 ghosts who are most regularly seen. The Peeker, who I've seen a handful of times. I'll be there 2 years in August, by the way. He likes to look around corners at you and slowly gets further and further around the corner until you look up. He'll be shocked and duck. And when you see him, he's gone. Several of my coworkers have seen him, and we all laugh at how funny he looks when he's caught. The nuns. I did say it was a Catholic hospital. Of course, there'd be nuns. I've seen one fully realized, floating. Almost looked like she was running, going from one resident's room across to the dining area to another. Lots of coworkers have seen them in the reflections of the glass, walking next to us. On the 5th floor, there's one who, if you listen, you can hear her heavy footsteps walking behind you. I had one resident who saw ghosts easily. She would often be teaching a class of student ghosts in her room. And there was a time I was helping her, and she said that there was a lady behind me who was wearing a veil looking over my shoulder. I said, "I hope she thinks I'm doing a good job." And my resident said, "Well, she must, because she just left." We consider the nuns as our coworkers as well, because strange things will happen. Someone speaking, items being moved, doors closing. And we usually take it as a nun has seen something going on. A resident is up or wandering or someone's hurt. So we go check all the rooms. 8 times out of 10, something is going on with the resident. The Dark Man. He wears all dark clothes and has dark features. I've never seen him, but a couple coworkers and residents have. He leans against a wall and will watch you work. When you realize he's there and do a double take, he's gone. No one knows who he is or if he's friendly, but he's never done anything that would indicate that he's mean. The Long Man. Only residents have seen him, and I hope I never see him. He's frightening. From the description my residents have given, let's just say I wouldn't want to see him. He'll be in the resident's ceiling, and when they notice him, he extends down into their doorways and wears a big smile. He's really tall and has sort of a stoop in the doorway. He won't move until the resident begins to scream. Yeah, it's that terrifying. And then he disappears into the floor. Absolutely horrifying. As for some of my experiences, other than the usual saw it out of the corner of my eye bullshit, these are hauntings that I've personally experienced, or I've been around when coworkers experienced themselves. Just a few nights ago, I was mopping up the floor in front of the kitchen. The door to the kitchen has a small glass window, and I was about 8 feet away. I looked up, and there was a man looking through the window. He looked extremely unusual. His skin was as pink as a pig's, and his eyes were wide open looking down. When I did a double take, I thought, was that my reflection? And then he was gone. I still looked into my reflection, but mine was much darker and less defined than what I saw. I told my coworker. They came down into the kitchen and began to yell at the ghost. I told her that it wasn't necessary. About an hour later, we were eating and talking about the interaction with a separate coworker when a full milk jug that had been sitting on the table suddenly flew off, and a split second, perfectly on the floor. I said, "Oh, you pissed him off," and we all kind of joked about it moving forward. Catholic hospital. Still fresh, and I was new, and I was trying to drag these heavy baskets of laundry. I happened to be in front of the nurse's office, which used to be the head nun's office, and I cursed. Shittin' ass damn. Interesting choice. And all of the heavy fire doors around me slammed shut. I immediately apologized for cursing. I was terrified to open the doors because I thought an angry nun would be behind them. I was walking along the 3rd floor when I saw a dark shadow and it dipped into a room. We had a resident who was actively dying on hospice. The spirits always get antsy when someone's dying. I said, "She's on the 2nd floor if that's who you're looking for." A little over an hour later, the lady passed away. My coworker on the first night went into a room and immediately came back out. She said she'd seen a dark shadow child standing next to a dying resident's bed. The child looked up at her, then just walked through the wall. She wanted us to come in with her after that. The coworker was in the kitchen when a voice said, "Shut the damn door." Door was shut and the steel cabinets all flew open. She was absolutely terrified, and I remember how scared that she sounded when she paged up for assistance in the kitchen. Previous coworker, who'd yelled at the ghost before, was the one who went down to yell once again. Coworker came and got me and said the radio in the dining room turned on and wanted me to shut it off. When we went in, it was off. I said, "Well, it's time for everyone to go to bed anyways. Go to sleep." The ghosts must not have liked that, because the door shut and the radio turned on to old jazz music. So I said, "Fine, but don't be grouchy in the morning." My fiancé at the time and I went to visit my dad. We had just bought a property built in the 1800s, and this was just a place to eventually modernize and sell. It was still in great shape, and he invited us to stay there for the weekend instead of bothering with a hotel. We arrived and tired from our drive, and pretty quickly found the master bed and bathroom to get ready for bed. While using the restroom, I noticed some cold drafts and heard some rhythmic pacing-like sounds coming from the wooden floors. I brushed the cold off without the thought at the time and assumed my fiancé was just looking around the room, even though the walking sounds was more like a boot than a foot with socks hitting the floor. At any rate, we both went to bed and fell asleep pretty quickly. At some point, my fiancé's nudging me in the side. "Sweetheart, sweetheart." She's whispering, but has an urgency in her voice. I opened my eyes, and my heart and blood went cold for a second. There's a faint white figure standing there, just looking at us at the foot of the bed. We both saw it clear as day. What was even more jarring is that same draftiness I felt before was back. The figure had a feminine essence and somehow an 1800s look. Fiancé and I held hands underneath the covers, but sort of both awkwardly caught off guard. The thing we both remember now, aside from being a bit petrified, is that we didn't really sense any hostility or malice. Just a good 10 minutes of holy crap. the figure stayed relatively still, just sort of shifting her head back and forth like you would while looking at an item at sale or something interesting. Then, as suddenly as everything started, the figure just went away. The rest of the time, we just noticed odd sounds and slept downstairs in the living room, all lights on. My dad also had a Corvette stored in the carriage house, but my fiancé insisted that there was bad energy, so we never went in and took it out for a spin. AskReddit. One weekend, I was at my dad's house. He'd come to the upstairs bathroom to get a shave and heard footsteps in my stepsister's room. I thought it was him walking around initially, so I got up to find him. Gecko. And he was standing at her closed door. He looks back at me and whispers, "You can hear that too, right?" I nodded, and he opened the door slowly. My stepsister was asleep, and never had been awake apparently, and there was no way that she could have crossed the room, gotten into bed, and pretended to be that convincingly asleep in the 2 seconds it took my dad to open the door. He went in, checked her TV, which had never been on. She has one of those big ones from the 90s that would get warm when turned on. The radio hadn't been on either. Figured maybe it was just the beat of a song or something. After that, we heard the footsteps a bunch of times, usually very early in the morning. Some of the footsteps were so heavy they'd shake the ceiling fan of the dining room directly underneath her bedroom, and they'd woken her up a few times as well. Whenever I'd shower at my dad's, I always felt like someone was standing behind me. Eventually, I got so stressed and paranoid that I refused to shower in the house, or even go into the upstairs bathroom. My dad asked me one day, "Do you ever feel like someone in the shower is with you when you're here?" After months of me feeling that way and never mentioning it to anyone. AskReddit. I was in art class when I was 15, and a random teacher's aide, a lady in her 60s, unassuming nanotype, sat down next to me and said that she had a vision about my job as an adult. I was like, "Oh, am I a photographer?" She said no. I was fairly dismissive and skeptical because I was certain that's what I'd be doing. But I said, "Oh, yo, tell me what you saw." She then went on to describe my job. None of it made much sense at the time, and you could tell that she didn't quite understand what she saw. She said she couldn't figure out where I was because the place had no windows and everything was a pastel green color. She said I was making something that looked like CD covers, but they weren't that. She went on to explain that I was working with a bunch of guys, and some of them were helping and teaching me do the job. But the thing that really stuck out was that she keeps seeing me do this thing where I look at whatever it was I was making, and that I would change the angle of it. She mimicked what I was doing. Anyway, about 8 years later, I ended up doing exactly all the things she said I was going to do. I was a wine label flexographic printer helper, I guess. It got me so bad, or rather it got to me so bad that my future was set in stone that I eventually quit my job to pursue a fine art and photography career. That was a few years back, and I'm about to have my second solo exhibition opening this weekend. What I still haven't figured out yet was, have I broken the timeline, or was I just meant to have that future told and then pursue a different career. It's all pretty out there, and I'm not too sure what to make of it because I'm not the type of person to believe in that sort of stuff. But, it happened, so there are people that can see into the future, and they are 100% right. I hear clapping outside my window every night at 2 a.m. Oh, we got a warning here, guys. This is saying it's not safe for work. So, the narrator here has given you fair warning, and I proceed. I always tried to sleep with my curtains and window open. I've just never been that cautious, but recently, I started to hear someone or something making clapping sounds outside. Oh no. I didn't think too much of it, and I would just go to sleep. But last night, my friend, let's call her Tracy, slept at mine, and at exactly 2 a.m., the sound started again. So feeling brave, me and Tracy tried to investigate where the sound was coming from. I put my flashlight on and checked my garden, but as I thought, nothing. So we both lay back down, and the sound stopped for a few minutes. And then started again, and that's when I saw it. Someone, or should I say something, was lying down over my roof just staring at us. Before I go on, I should probably explain how my roof sits. I live in quite a small house, and the way it is built is quite strange. My bedroom is on the second floor, and there's a little gap between my window and the roof. The roof goes out a slight bit, and it's just in reaching distance. Anyways, in shock, me and Tracy slammed the window shut and closed the curtains, and we stayed dead silent for what felt like hours. Feeling stupidly brave again, we decided to open the curtains and have a quick look to make sure our imagination wasn't just getting the better of us. And there it was again, but this time closer. I don't even know how to describe what we seen. This thing had white blonde raggedy hair, and all I can remember is the eyes, strangely enough. And I couldn't remember a face. Just that hair and eyes, like it was glaring into my soul. Panicking, I text my old friend who lives across from me to check out my roof, as both of us couldn't move and we were in shock. She told me she couldn't see anything, so we opened the window one last time, and there was nothing. No noise, no person. We locked the window again and tried to distract ourselves till morning. Since Tracy went home, everything feels off, and strange stuff has been happening. I keep hearing creaking and doors opening around the house. My nose has bled non-stop, and I'm starting to panic staying here alone. I've locked all my doors, windows, and curtains. That's the end of the story. That seems perfectly safe for work. I was ready for something worse. Next story. Does anybody know anything about or seen ghosts carrying wagons before? When I was 5, I was in the car with my parents and sister. I think it was either in Fluorescent, Colorado, or Florissant, perhaps, or on our drive to Colorado, because we had just moved there. It was like 2003 at the time. They went to the gas station, and I was tired and I didn't feel like going in. It was on a hill with dirt dug out to make room for the gas station. After they went in, I saw 2 glowing white figures carrying a wagon with a figure inside, and it looked like a dog or something with wings. I know it sounds dumb, but I know I was awake because I was so terrified that I hid behind the seat in the car. I watched them slowly walk to the back of the gas station, and then my family came back. Part of me wanted to go back there and look, but I was too scared. I asked my mom, and she said she remembers me telling her about it. Has anyone experienced something similar? Another strange fact is that later on we moved back to Florida, and we stayed at my grandma's house for a while. I don't think the house was old or anything, but I went to sleep for like 5 minutes, and I woke up, and someone was whispering my name. I thought my sister was playing pranks on me. I went to her room and asked her, but she was just pissed off that I woke her up and everyone else in the house was dead asleep. Maybe I'm insane, but sometimes I feel like something followed us and has been plaguing my family ever since. My dad became an abusive psycho when we first moved to Colorado, and then my mom got dystonia at the same time. It was also the same year that she apparently went to a psychic. We moved back to Colorado in the Woodland Park, and later on my dad got way more abusive towards me and told me that he thought I was possessed because I was just staring at the ceiling one day. I ended up being in a foster home due to my father's abuse, and my parents ended up getting divorced. What makes it scarier is that I still have no idea what happened. This is the only weird or paranormal thing that's ever happened to me. I was 11 and recently moved to another city with my family due to my father being in the country's army. We were staying there for a year, and thankfully, the army gave us a decent house in a complex building built for officials with families. Each house had their own large backyard and was separated from other houses by 12-foot concrete walls. One Sunday, my family went to buy some stuff at the supermarket. My older sister went with them, and my little one was still a baby, so I was going to be alone for a couple of hours. I was okay just playing with my dog, but I remember that I needed to get my black socks from my school. I guess I had my school's Monday uniform, and it resembled a suit and a tie kind of a look. I went to the backyard to get them, since they were hanging to dry. At this point, I was getting bored of waiting for my socks, and I say out loud, "I'm really bored," only to almost immediately hear a young voice clearly say, "Then let's play." The voice was clear but not loud. Didn't feel like it came from in front of me or any of my sides. It was just there. I turned around to see my normally hyperactive golden retriever sitting quietly and staring at me. I look around very fast, trying to sort of find the source of the voice. But the house to the right was empty and separated by a concrete wall, like I said. The house to the left was over 50 feet away and behind the wall as well. And behind my house, there was a long wall with nothing but a steep hill and a house at the bottom behind it. I ran for dear life and hid in my parents' bedroom underneath the covers and turned on the TV at max volume till they arrived. I explained to them what happened, and they had to calm me down for the rest of the day. I have no idea what that was, and to this day, I still can't put my finger on it. I knew the kids in the house to the left, and it wasn't any of their voices. The house to the right didn't have any kids, and there's no way some kid climbed a hill, then a 12-foot wall covered in sharp glass at the top, just to say that to me. Is my house haunted? I literally don't know how to explain this. For the last few nights, I keep seeing things. But I convinced myself that it was just my illusion and slept. Last night, I can't get over. I'm for sure something was there. Honestly, for a few years I saw stuff. But then they would disappear until this year. I don't know what to do. I can't describe when I've been seeing. Perhaps they meant what. But a little information of an older story. I was chilling at night, and my lights can dim and get brighter. I noticed my lights dimmed a little, and then went back to the old setting that I had set them on originally. Another old story. This one's during the day. I didn't see anything, but I heard and felt it. I was chilling and heard loud footsteps and then felt something heavy sit on my mattress. For both of these instances, I got my ass up and ran. Last night, I was so scared and felt so uneasy. The last couple of nights themselves made me feel like I was being watched while I was sleeping. And I swore I saw something in the closet. But last night, it was INA. Different spot. Oh, it was in a different spot. I was so scared and shit, and I can't move. So I shut my eyes and prayed in my head to Lord Krishna till I fell asleep. I completely forgot about last night until now. My back was itchy and I felt a scar, like a scratch. I didn't scratch myself, and I heard that ghosts can give you scratches. Perhaps. Is My House Haunted? Part 2. I had evidence this time. I have a puppy. His name's Teddy. He hasn't been doing this lately, but I'm sure he's seen something that we don't. Me and my mom sleep, and most nights my dad's at work. He works at night, but on his days off he spends his time watching TV. Now, when my dad leaves the room and my dog sees, he barks loud. He only barks loud when he sees someone, whether it's us when he hasn't seen us for a while or a stranger. This is important. Sometimes he barks weirdly. When he sees a stranger, she barks loud. I'll come back to this. But he seemed scared. He was hesitating to bark. My mom woke up, put him on the floor. He ran over and looks up, and it seemed like he was following something going down the stairs or something. I know he saw something and was following it. He began scratching my leg and told me to take him downstairs. He only does this when he desperately wants to go down there. He usually does it when my mom comes home from work and she hasn't come up in a while and he gets tired of waiting. This time I know he's seen something. A few nights ago, he barked at my dad's room. My dad was at work. He wasn't barking the weird way, like I just stated. He was barking the same way he barks when he sees a stranger in or out of the house. He also barked like that when there was something unusual. Not like a box of tissues, something large. The last time he barked at an object, it was an AC in the field, more half of my size. Sometimes I hear things that my dog does as well. One time he heard it so bad he walked off the pillow. He sleeps on my bed. Walked across the bed, not like he usually did. Like he was in a rush, trying to protect the house. He only walks like that when someone gets home and he's rushing to see them. He stared for a long time before sleeping. AskReddit. When I was 15, I was up in my room. laying on my bed and reading. Then I heard a loud, angry stomping coming from up the stairs. Loud stomping down the hallway. Thought it was my 12-year-old sister, who always threw tantrums. So I stopped reading and watched my door, anticipating my sister to come flying in at any second. Once the stopping got to my door flew open super hard and fast, like it was kicked open. Then, no one was there. It was super quiet. I knew it wasn't my brother because I had a clear view of his door, and the second my door flew open. And his door was shut. I went to his room, and he was laying down with headphones on, so he didn't hear it. I went downstairs, and my sister was sitting peacefully on the couch with my parents. They didn't hear a thing either. My door got a big dent because when it flew open, it hit my dresser. Another time I was on the toilet, and there was a glass decorative bowl on the back of the toilet. Then I heard the sound of the glass bowl sliding across the porcelain. I looked behind me, and the bowl all of a sudden landed and shattered 6 feet away. I didn't see it fly or anything, just once I turned to look at it, I heard it hit the floor 6 feet away. It shattered into so many pieces, and it was super loud. AskReddit. Most of my friends have had trouble with substance abuse throughout their lives. Just the crowd I hung around with, I guess. Around the time of this story, one of my closest friends was clean off H for longest that they'd ever been. A couple of months, but still fantastic progress for him. And things were looking good. We were hanging out one day and he gave me some great news. Since middle school, he and his mom had been fighting for medical malpractice lawsuits that happened to him when he was younger, and they won. He got something like $10,000 to $15,000 out of the deal. So most of what we talked about that day was how he was going to buy his mom something nice, and how he was going to use that money to finally go to college. I honestly hadn't seen him that happy in years, and it was great. A day or two later, I was sleeping like normal, when all of a sudden, I woke up at around 1 a.m. I felt great. In fact, I felt absolutely euphoric. I felt like I was lying in the sun of the most beautiful summer's day in a puddle of 1,000 puppies. Pretty happy. And that was just the first second. The second second was like 1,000 times, and the next second was like 1,000 times as well. Within moments, I went from, this is pretty nice, to, oh shit, something is seriously, before blacking out. All of a sudden, I was walking down the stairs to my friend's basement. It was absolutely destroyed with shit thrown everywhere. Empty bottles and syringes laying around, and he was sitting there, waiting for me, on the couch, with tears in his eyes. He kept repeating that he was sorry, that he didn't want to hurt anybody. He said the money didn't last him long, and he's been basically being back to his broke-ass self, and he was sorry for bringing me there, and that he just needed to say goodbye to someone before finally saying goodbye, though, and everything fading out in another wave of euphoria. Me being logical to a fault, and pretty straightforward, I woke up the next morning thinking, damn, what a dream. But not much else of it. I wrote it down in a dream journal, and then I completely forgot about it. Ended up going to work and to class like normal. Then, a couple hours later, my friend's mom called. She called me to break the news that my friend had passed away. Overdose. It wasn't until a couple of months later when another friend of mine, also an ex-addict, was trying to console my boyfriend, or console me by telling me about he went with no pain and how it was probably the best thing to go when it starts to get really weird. He started to explain to me what an overdose actually feels like, the overwhelming euphoria, and how it's impossible to explain to someone who's never experienced it before, i.e. me. It was then that what he was describing started to sound really familiar, and I went to my phone, opened my dream journal, and started reading the entry from a couple months back to him out loud. He pretty much said, "Yeah, exactly that. Where'd you get that story?" and told him the whole thing. Both of us were at a loss for words, and I still am. As I said, I don't believe in this stuff. And if someone told me this story, I would say that they were high as fuck, but it's a memory that I'll personally never forget. Weird dream that might have been real? This happened in, I want to say, October last year. If someone wants the exact date, I can probably find it, but it would just take a while. So, October. It was the night of my school's homecoming dance that I wasn't particularly excited for. I got peer pressured into it by my friends, because I'm not a very social person and wouldn't much rather not gone. Anyways, my school has this rule for events that you can't arrive past a certain time and you can't leave before a different certain time. I have no clue why. It's pretty stupid. I don't remember what time it was because my friend took my phone because I was quote-unquote using it too much and needed to go talk to some girls. I ended up sitting in a chair near the backside of the gym, which is facing the front lawn the whole night. I somehow fall asleep in said chair and had a very strange dream that I guess I can still remember it in vivid detail right now. The dream is in a first-person perspective of some guy operating a machine. There are a bunch of buttons and knobs and levers all around me, and there's a massive black box in the center of the room. I'm pressing a bunch of stuff and some other guy comes in wearing a night robe, rubbing his eyes, clearly tired. "It's so late, go to bed. It's not working and it's not going to work before tomorrow." "One more, I need one more," I responded, but the voice is a lot deeper, just not at all similar to my normal voice. My guess is that they were all around college age. So the other guy sighs, walks away, and I keep pressing buttons. Then the box in the room starts glowing and vibrating, and then explodes with a purplish red light. So I wake up, and I'm back in the chair at the dance. I'm startled by the dream. I fall back in the chair and I'm looking through this big window on one of the walls. And I swear on my life, I saw a dude in a lab coat sprinting across the lawn. I completely lose my shit and I try to leave to investigate, but I guess it was before 10 o'clock, so I couldn't leave. I had to sit there for 20 minutes wondering what the fuck I saw. And the worst part is, this girl I liked asked me to dance with her, and for a split second, she was replaced with a woman I don't recognize who had blood all over her face and was screaming. So that didn't work out. After the dance, when I was walking home, I saw a massive square hole in the ground by the train tracks next to my school. I have seen both of my great-grandparents post-mortem. There are 2 times I saw one of my great-grandparents. One I do and one I don't remember. Number 1, great-grandfather. My great-grandfather died long before I was born, but I saw him once, and only once, when I was 4. My great-grandmother was on her deathbed from complications due to a botched surgery, and we were saying our final goodbyes. I was waiting outside the room in one of those sitting areas with my family, and after giving my final goodbye, an old man in his 70s approached me, wearing a brown vest, a brown newsboy cap, and a pair of glasses. He had a white mustache, and he introduced himself to me as my great-grandfather. I talked to him for a couple of minutes. I don't remember about what, but I hugged him, and then he parted ways with me. Years later, I found out who he was and that he died before I was born, and I was left shocked. I told them about talking to him and described him and the newsboy cap. There were no pictures of him wearing a newsboy cap, although he did wear it occasionally. Number 2, great-grandmother. This one's a lot shorter because I don't remember it. Basically, a year or 2 after she died, we went back to Pittsburgh to visit family. Me and my brother were laughing, and my mom asked why we said Bubba, her nickname, and it seemed like we were having a conversation with her. I was tormented by a spirit during my first 2 years at university. In 2020, I moved over 6 hours away from my hometown in southern Ontario to attend university up north. I moved into my town with my best friend from high school, whom I had known for years. In this building, it's important to note that it's been around since the school was first built. However, it's frequently renovated and worked on because it more often than normal catches fire. More details later. So to set the scene, it's 2020, mid-pandemic, and I had just been discharged from the Army. My best friend and I applied for the same university major and had decided that if we got in, that we would live together. Well, sure enough, we got in, and the only dorm that could accommodate our room request, i.e. moving into the same apartment with separate bedrooms, was situated directly across from a hospice. And for those that don't know what a hospice is, it's a medical facility where people go when they're close to death to live out the end of their lives in as much comfort as possible. This hospice was the only view out of our small windows, and was the only one in our area. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the building frequently caught fire. But what was odd, and worth mentioning, was that it only caught fire in apartment number 5 on any given floor. My best friend and I lived on the 5th floor in the 5th apartment for 2 years, even throughout the summer. Unfortunately, we never had a fire, but frequently found ourselves having to accommodate firefighters and other workers entering our room due to the smoke and water damage from various different fires from random floors directly above us. Along with my BFF, I had 2 other roommates who were very vocal about when they were home or when they left. We had a group chat. And for all of these experiences, they were never home, or even in the city for that matter. My friend and I both got jobs working at a level 1 trauma center as night shift security, and thus, paranormal stuff didn't scare us as we were frequently forced to work with the morgue and even witness people die on a daily basis, with a whole bunch of other things happening. Maybe more stories for another time. The main experience that happened was early on. It was when my BFF and I both awoke to hear someone going through our cupboards and garbage in the kitchen, which was right against my bedroom wall, thus making it super loud. It was about 1 p.m., and because we were on night shift, it was our version of 1 a.m. So, thinking my best friend had gotten up, oddly early, I went to talk to her. But when I opened my door, there was no one. I woke her up quietly, and we searched the entire apartment and the hallways with whatever we could use as weapons. There was no one, but everything was open. Our fridge, the oven, drawers, cabinets, and our garbage had been thrown across the room. All the breakers in our apartment had been switched off as well, which we didn't discover at first. It is important to mention that the only entry into our apartment was the front door, and it automatically locked when closed. So it was most definitely locked 24/7. I called building security, and no one had been seen on camera entering our dorm, except for my BFF and me around 8 a.m., after we had gotten off work at the hospital. There was no explanation for who had done this, but still, they took our statements and said that we do patrols. They never found more information. Over 3 months later, it was summer, and my BFF and I had been 2 of 11 people left in the building over the summer, with the rest being mostly just international students who could afford to do quarantine protocols again in September, as it took 2 weeks. We were the only ones on our floor, but regularly heard stomping outside in the hall, but neither of us saw anybody. We looked through the peepholes, and even we heard knocks on the front door. However, when we checked, no one, every time. So aside from the knocking and stomping, super quiet summer, except for one morning, I'll never forget it, shook us to the bone. It was 10 a.m., and my roommate and I were asleep after work. I never locked my bedroom door, as my BFF loved to come in and hang all the time, but for some reason, I locked it that entire week. And good thing too, because I awoke to a frantic, and I mean frantic knocking. No pounding on my bedroom door. I was obviously super disoriented, as I had just finished a 12-hour shift a few hours earlier. But I saw 2 dark shadows underneath the door resembling feet. I figured my BFF needed something and woke up, but I called out before getting up because I was annoyed to be awake this early. The feet stayed unmoving, but the knocking stopped. With a heavy sigh, I got up, threw on a sweater, and checked for the time. It was about 10 a.m. I went to open the door. With the shadow still there, I assumed it was my BFF. When I put my hand on the handle to unlock it, I heard a thud. And then, worried that my BFF had fallen, I threw the door open to see the front door closing as if someone was leaving. I ran over and saw a completely black figure turn the corner. I followed, my security guard instincts kicking in. But when I turned the corner, nothing. I went back to my roommate to ask why they were knocking on the walls like that. She heard it from inside my room on an adjoining shared wall to both of our bedrooms. We again called security, but only I was seen chasing after nothing on the cameras. After my boyfriend, a firefighter, started sleeping over frequently because we were both spooked, the fire stopped. And most other things did too. We never had another incident on this level. We moved out after 2 years there, and beyond hearing the usual bang, no other issues.